I'm going to talk to you about a method of performing timing attack on RSA to get out the key, and the device under test is going to be using left to right Montgomery. And the technique is based on stuff I read in various books, most significantly the DPA book by Mangard, Oswald, and Pop. And there was no real name for it, but as it happened, when I started giving this course, it was around Purim, so I just decided. I also couldn't find any good acronym, so I just called it the Vaizata method because it's relevant to Purim. Purim was the last time we went to school, wasn't that a while ago? Yes, so what is the idea of the Vaizata method of offensive statistics? And what we're trying to do is get out the key from a device under test, and we're trying to do it using statistics. So we begin by making a very simple assumption about the device under test, the device which we're trying to attack. And very, very simple assumption. And this assumption is kind of in the neighborhood of reverse engineering, but it's, of course, much more simplistic. So let's start talking about what kind of assumptions I can justify making. I can say this device has a microcontroller and it is doing the cryptography in software. Or I can say this device has a crypto accelerator chip and it's doing all the crypto in hardware. I can say the device has a memory storage, a flash, and the secret key is stored on the flash. And when I turn on the device, it reads from the flash. These are the kinds of assumptions I can make. Or I can make the assumption that I know more or less when in time the device is doing its encryption. So how do I do this kind of baby reverse engineering? So I want to know if the device, for example, has a software implementation or a hardware implementation of cryptography. How do I do that? Yeah, so one thing I can do is take the device and open it and look inside and see, maybe I see there's a chip called the super duper high speed crypto chip limited. Or maybe I just see Arduino tutorial version 2 and I know it's on software. Okay, what if I don't want to look inside the chip or look inside the box? What other things can I do? Something which is a little simpler. Well, I can go to a repair website. Places like iFixit or Instructables and so on. And I can see they have disassemblies. Very, very nice website, iFixit. And other places, they just tell you what's inside the device. You don't have to open it. And the third thing, yes, Orel is saying, I can look at the firmware. So firmware, if I see the device has firmware updates, that's a good indication that it's running software because firmware updates usually update software. So that's actually a good sign. Another thing I can do is look at marketing materials. You need to update once in a while because otherwise we'll run out of bugs. So we can see marketing materials, and for example, Google released a new chip called the Titan chip, and they're very proud of the Titan chip. So they say, "Hi, now we have hardware encryption," and so on. So we can do this. We can do this very cheaply, and we make a very, very simple assumption. So in our case, I'm going to assume that the smart card has a software implementation, and I'm going to assume it's doing RSA using Montgomery, using left to right Montgomery. And that's a pretty reasonable assumption. Of course, if it's an open source device, I can just look at the source again. or if it's stealing from an open source repository, I can look at the source and so on. So now I have a little assumption on the device. Now, based on this assumption, I am going to guess a little bit of the key. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do left to right. So the A times G problem, or if you think about the A times G problem very carefully, I don't want to do it in class right now. Think about it. What inputs does the attacker control? The attacker controls the message. The attacker does not control the secret signing key. So the attacker can measure the Hamming weight of the key. If the attacker can exactly determine how much time does a single modular exponentiation take, you can see if there are a lot of ones in the key or maybe a not lot of ones in the key. And that's the only thing you can do. That doesn't get you very far. So only left to right. In this specific implementation, doesn't help you a lot. But if you have Montgomery, you're going to get a nice thing. So I'm going to do now by induction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to simulate the execution of the device from the beginning to the end. I have an assumption on the device, and this assumption allows me to do a simulation. And I have a little bit of the key, which I already guessed by induction. In the beginning, of course, I don't know anything, but I'm doing it by induction. And now I've reached the phase where I don't know the next bit or byte of the key. My induction ends. And now my next induction step is going to try to guess the key. So if I'm guessing one bit of the key, there are only two possible options. If I'm guessing one byte, there are 256 options, and so on. And now I can do two different simulations. I can do a simulation with a guess of 0, and I can do a simulation with a guess of 1. And I'm going to check if my simulations are explaining my measurements properly. And because I'm doing it very statistically, I don't have to really dig into what the implementation is doing. What I'm trying to do is see if I have any kind of impact on the computation, and all this will be explained in good time. So I want to talk a little bit more about the baby reverse engineering in the context. Before I dig into timing attacks on RSA, I want to talk a little about a nice cryptographic device which we usually have in our pockets, but now we don't have it in our pockets anymore, and this is the remote control of our car. So also called the Immobilizer. It has a button. You press the button, it opens the car. Very nice. And this device, did anybody here study the security of immobilizers before? Okay. So I'll tell you basically what they do. So I see some people came back from the break, and this is really nice. So the device, many immobilizers have what is called a rolling code security. And the idea is that the immobilizer has a serial number, and it has a bunch of buttons. And every time I press the button, the immobilizer takes the serial number, takes the bit field of which buttons are pressed, and then it takes a secret key, and it encrypts the serial number and the bit field to get the ciphertext and send it to the car. There's one thing missing here. Does anybody know what's missing? Indeed, right, a replay attack. So the problem is, with what I told you right now, an attacker can just record me opening the car, and without trying to decrypt it, just playing the radio waves, he can open the car again. So how do I get around that? I need to add another thing. I add the serial number, right? The serial number. I'm saying serial number in serious waking. the bit field, and a counter. I'm just using a counter. A timestamp is all of these things don't help me. IV and salt and nonce don't help me for replay text. But the counter is going to help me. So the counter means that once the car got the calculation, it will refuse to accept older transactions, and it of course will refuse to get replaced. So this is how a car works. And in attacking this and hacking this is a fascinating piece of work. I did a little work on this in my master's, but now we know that this is how a car Immobilizer works because there are many data sheets. And now I have this remote control and I'm trying to attack it. So there are several operations which are very easy to measure. One of them is reading the serial number out of the memory. And I know that because there is a little enable bit on the memory chip, and I can look at it in the oscilloscope, and I see precisely when the serial number is being read. Another thing which is easy to measure is when the updated counter is written back into the memory, because writing is kind of an intensive process. It consumes a lot of battery. So I can identify the precise moment at which the incremented counter is written back to storage. And the third thing, which I can very easily detect, is when the immobilizer is transmitting, because this is a radio operation and a lot of machinery gets into motion when this happens. So I have three operations. I have reading the serial number, writing the updated counter, and powering on the radio frequency mechanism to transmit. And sometimes in there is an encryption. You need to encrypt the serial number, the counter, and the buttons to create my my rolling code, which I need to transmit. So now, tell me, and I try to find the time where I think encryption is happening, because I'm going to be looking very carefully at this moment of time. So, do you think that encryption happens before you transmit? Yes or no? So do you encrypt before you transmit? Yes, or after you transmit? No. Okay, so you encrypt. So this is also what I think. You encrypt before you transmit. Why is that? Because you can't get the ciphertext to transmit unless you you did encryption first. Okay, another question. What is the chat here saying? I read the ID from the ROM, from the flash, and the counter is also stored in the flash, because when this immobilizer in my pocket is not running any clock, it's just sitting there idle. It's completely turned off. I have four operations, but I'm just talking about finding when I read this. Okay, I agree. So next question is, am I going to encrypt before or after I read out the serial number from the storage? So A is encrypt. Yes, I encrypt before I read the number, or no, I encrypt after I read the number from the memory, the serial number of the chip. Yes means first I encrypt and then I read out the serial number, and no means first I read out the serial number and then I encrypt. So I agree with you. Yes, obviously you can't encrypt unless you read out the serial number, because you don't know what to encrypt. You are just powered off, and now you're turning on, and you don't know, your memory is completely blank, so you need to read the serial number from memory, and only then you can encrypt. Okay, fine. And now the third question is writing the updated counter to the storage. So do you do that before or after you encrypt? So yes, you write the counter before you encrypt, or no, you write the counter after you encrypt. What do you do first? Write the counter or encrypt? So yes means first of all you write the counter and then you encrypt, and no means first of all you encrypt and then you write the counter. And yeah, so I also agree with you here that this is completely implementation dependent. I don't know what they do. I can't make any assumption based on that. That's not useful for me as an attacker. But you see that some assumptions are useful for me as an attacker. Uh, yeah, I have a guest commenting. Lots of comments. What are the comments? Is this even relevant? Well, if I want to focus down on the exact time where encryption is happening, and I'm telling you this is the thing we do in the lab, because if we can focus it to a short time, we can sample it with very good resolution. I want to say it's doing before this or after that. Removing noise or just increasing the sampling rate or using the different